going on, guys? So the stock market is getting hammered yet again today, especially the semiconductor space. If you look around all of tech, between missed earnings, lowering guidance, it's just not a pretty picture out there. And I'm going to kind of go through, the stocks that I've been following here on the channel and kind of like bigger points, talking about the overall market and kind of what's going on and what I see happening and kind of like why I think things are happening the way they are. So first off, we can just go through a rundown of, just a quick rundown of the week. So if you look at the S&P is down another 4.2% today, and it has officially entered a correction as of today. The Dow's down another 3.26%, the Nasdaq's down 4.23%, and none of the indexes are positive for the week, and the majority of them now have wiped out their gains for 2018. And a lot of that can be due to, the majority of the mega heavy weighted tech sector is now pulling down all of the industries. And that's due to a lot of things because, again, as I've said time and time again, the second that things start to get volatile and people, start to view the stock market as risky again, tech is going to get hit the hardest. And as of right now, the biggest companies in all of the indexes are heavy tech. So it's gonna be kind of ugly for a little bit. So obviously, I know a lot of you are following AMD. AMD was in a bloodbath this week. AMD is down 28%. But honestly, we saw this coming. If you guys you talked about, like when I talked about how I viewed AMD was relatively overvalued, and even though that AMD was able to beat its earnings, it only beat it by 8%, and that's on a year-over-year basis, and that's prior to all of the new issues that Intel has had, with coming out with their new line and everything. So they realistically only beat by 8% on guidance that was back when the stock was trading around $10 a share. So a lot of people that have been pricing up AMD over the past couple of weeks wanted perfection, and they wanted to see massive, revenue growth and massive market share taken away from Intel. And again, that just wasn't feasible in such a short amount of time. Like, there's no way that the company's fundamentals would have tripled in the amount of time that the stock value tripled. They also gave really weak guidance. They kind of looked at that as, especially with the GPU sales, that they say, like, yes, we do believe that our CPUs and our data centers are going to be selling out pretty well. And we expected growth in that, but because of the GPU sales and they're relating it to, blockchain type issues are going to be down. So they were down quarter over quarter. They said high single percent. So I'm just going to round that up to 10 because I'm assuming the realistic number that they didn't really talk about is either anywhere from 7 to 9%. So I'm going to assume, just round number that it's 10% down, and they expect further weakness because, if you followed my original channel, with one of the benefits that AMD was getting from this is that AMD's GPUs were better for mining anything that wasn't Bitcoin. So anything that was based off Ethereum and all like the newer altcoins that were coming out, AMD's GPUs were, cheaper and more efficient at mining them. So AMD was just getting a boatload of orders. And obviously, if you look at the price of Bitcoin and any of the other cryptocurrencies, they're not doing well this year compared to what they were doing last year. So that's to be expected. And also, AMD hasn't really come out with a flagship GPU yet. Their last Vega line was a relative disappointment, and then they overpriced it. So it just wasn't executing well on the GPU line. And with NVIDIA's coming out with their 2000 series, again, I've been saying it a lot. NVIDIA has better GPUs than AMD does, and that's to kind of be expected. Do I think that the sell-off was justified? Yes, and not entirely, and I'll get into that later. But next, so Intel, they just had their earnings, and they beat it. They beat by 22% roughly, and they're up on the day when the rest of the market was down. They're pretty much one of the only mega caps that was up. Their guidance seems changed. People were kind of freaking out that they weren't going to have the 10 nanometer, on time where they expect it, but it is going to be done with within the next half of the year, and they're going to be able to compete with AMD on that line. And something that I remember I brought up that not a lot of people really got was back when I said that the 10 nanometer from Intel is probably going to be as strong, if not stronger, than the 7 one that AMD is going to be producing, and that's because this isn't the first time that one of the companies has either focused on increasing speeds or increasing die size or anything like that. And what Intel always focuses on is that you know, book speeds are not going to blow AMD's out of the water, but the you know, like refining of their CPUs are generally significantly better than Intel's, at least in the past, up until Ryzen came and they had their security issues. So I definitely do think that when Intel comes out with this new line, unless AMD is able to innovate as well as it did when it first created the Ryzen line, I do not see AMD, you know, having the best flagship CPU out on the market next year. You know, assuming Intel is able to execute. If Intel isn't able to execute, that'll be a huge loss on the company, and then that is when Intel will start to really lose market share. But I personally believe in Intel. They're spending another $1 billion on their CapEx that they just approved, and I believe that they're going to be able to have it done. So you guys know I started a position in Intel when I sold out of AMD, and I still hold that same viewpoint on Intel. I think Intel is going to be doing great, and I think that they will continue to, you know, regain the market share that everybody seems to think that they took, that AMD was taking from them. And yes, while AMD was taking a lot of their market share over the past couple of quarters, we should know that Intel had a lot of issues. And something that I'll point out when I get to Micron is that the signs just weren't there to justify how much market share people were expecting AMD to take. And Micron is down pretty substantial today. Micron's down about, you know, 12.8% for the week, on relatively interesting news. So obviously when Texas Instruments started to miss, and, you know, other major tech companies started to miss earnings, it was just going to be a really bad week for semis, and Micron was no exception. But Micron got pulled down today, especially because of an issue that I think doesn't make any sense, and I'll kind of explain why. So there was an article that came out that talked about an analyst that was, you know, foreseeing continued NAND price declines, and they downgraded Western Digital, and then all of the other relating semiconductors tanked accordingly. So Micron, who, you know, makes solid state drives, lost market share today. But it's really interesting because if they paid attention to, you know, like what Micron's doing, and Micron, you know, finishing their acquisition of JV, they are shifting away from the NAND-based, you know, semiconductor. They're going towards their 3D point, the 3DX point drive, and that is going to be what product they plan on, you know, developing over the next year or so, and having that be their main line, you know, drive. So it's relatively interesting, you know, thinking about like, okay, well, NAND prices are one. In the last quarter, they were negligible impact to their profit. It was under, like they say, 25% of their revenue comes from NAND, but less than 10% of their actual profit comes from it. So even if you take off all of their NAND, yeah, their revenue goes down substantially, but the actual money that the company is making only goes down, say, 10%. So this isn't really that meaningful to the company, at least in my opinion. And so I just thought that it was kind of funny that, you know, everybody was just that trigger happy this past week to, you know, just sell things, that this was enough to drive Micron down another few percent. But on the bright side, Micron is fastly approaching its book value. And I said to you guys that I was going to start buying Micron, you know, at under $35. So I did start a small, you know, in the portfolio here, and I'll show you in a little bit. I did buy a couple more shares at $35, or under $35, today's close. And I plan on continuing buying it, and then the second that Micron, if it hits, say, $30 a share, that's when I'm going to start scaling up my actual size. Because I definitely think it can go below book value, but I do think book value is a pretty good price point to have a very good risk to reward for the company moving forward. So that's kind of it. And the thing I wanted to touch upon was kind of something that I pointed out in one of my videos when I said that, when I talked about my Micron recap on the earnings report, that if Micron was having an issue selling RAM, that means, and it was because of the Intel issue, that means that companies that were, say, going to build data centers or, you know, upgrade their data centers were not upgrading their CPU, and that means that they didn't need to, you know, buy all their new RAM because they were still running DDR3, so they don't need to switch to DDR4, which would mean that Micron would gain all that revenue. And what Micron said was that, and a lot of people are saying that, oh, it's an oversupply now of DRAM, and that's not exactly what it was. It was that we still have strong, you know, demand. It was just that it has to get pushed back a couple of months because of CPU shortages. And what that, like, dinged off in my head, and what I said on the video, was that if companies aren't buying CPUs, and Micron's not selling it to them. And this was right after all the issues that were coming out with AMD and Intel, and everybody thought that AMD was going to be taking this massive market share. If AMD was taking that market share, Micron wouldn't have run into the issue of not being able to sell out its DRAM. You know, if all those companies that say were, you know, Intel-based systems and they were switching, you know, to AMD, they would still need their DDR4, because regardless of what the CPU is, all modern CPUs run off of DDR4. So if they were buying the new CPUs, they were going to need to still upgrade that RAM, because none of that old RAM would be able to be used. And so the fact that Micron, you know, gave that little nugget to people, if you were like looking at the space as a whole and not just individual companies, and you're looking at like the whole workings of how each you know, semiconductor relates to one another, that means that they weren't selling out, and that was largely due to because AMD did not have, you know, the infrastructure to really supply all of the market share that Intel kind of left on the table for a couple of months. And AMD, again, still isn't viewed as this amazing semiconductor. It doesn't have the reputation that's built up like Intel has over the past couple of decades. So a lot of companies are just kind of holding off and waiting until the new Intel line comes out. And that's something that I tried to explain when I sold out of AMD, and a lot of people were just saying that, oh, I sold out too early. And no, that was kind of my reasoning for it. And that was something I brought up with Micron, and a couple of you were, you know, talking trash to me, like, you know, just joking with me. But I did want to say, like, that was a pretty big point that I think we now just saw the, you know, the complete ramification of it. Now, I did make a video about how because of Intel's lied to benchmarks, AMD could possibly go to 40. But I did mention in that would mean, you know, a couple of things had to fall really, you know, into AMD's, you know, like court, and everything needed to fall properly. It needed to, when the actual benchmarks came out, Intel's needed to be completely wrong. It needed to not justify the price difference. And AMD needed to rally again, you know, off a technical pattern. Between those two things, it could have rallied to 40. Neither one of those happened, and I'll look at the chart later and show how it failed, and that the fact that the i9 that came out was actually still really good. It just didn't fully justify the price difference, but the amount of difference that it had, you know, say like a lot of people say like, oh, let's double the price for only like 20% better. Sure, but that's for the end consumer. The majority of the revenue from both of these companies aren't coming from end consumers, they're coming from corporations. And so corporations, you know, they don't care about paying the, you know, the extra money, because at the end of the day, that like few percentage difference is going to increase their revenues massively, and also increase their efficiency. So a lot of companies, especially now when they have a lot of cash, you know, on a broad scope, just as the markets was doing well, they're going to go for Intel. So that's just something I wanted to point out. And so I do still hold my thesis that Intel and Micron are going to be, you know, the better plays, assuming, you know, short of having a recession. I do think Intel and Micron moving forward from right here are the better plays. However, if we go into, say, AMD's chart. So yeah, just a quick thing. So officially, we have now hit, as of this little tail today, we did hit a correction. A correction is anything over 10%. You know, it's official correction. It goes corrections anything from 10% to 19.99%, and then anything from 20% and below is qualified as a bear market / recession. So officially hit that today. We bounced back from it, but if we look at AMD, like AMD was just not doing well. You know, technically, like it started to show some signs of bounce, but it never cleared any of the moving averages that it needed to. And then, you know, it closed below all of its levels and then had a disappointing earnings and fell down to its 200-day moving average. So that's just what it is. Like a lot of things were priced to perfection with AMD. And, you know, it's not to say anything's wrong with the company. I'm not trying to say that AMD is not a good company and that they're not executing properly. They're executing just fine. It was just that the market got ahead of themselves, and the market immediately thought that AMD was going to continue to go up multiple upon multiple hundreds of percent just because Intel was faltering. And that's just not how it works. Like, you can't say that because Intel fumbles for a year that AMD is going to be able to, you know, quadruple as a company, you know, assuming it has mediocre or standard earnings. That's just not practical. You know, obviously, if you guys have still been in AMD for a while, you know, you're not just someone who jumped on the bandwagon. You know, you're still up. I think that this is around the accurate range to get into AMD. I might start a position soon because, I definitely still hold around $25 a share is where I think AMD is properly valued. And, going back up there, now we still have, now it's about 40% undervalued. Say if I go up now and it goes back up to proper value. So might get back into AMD. I'm not sure. I'll let you guys know if I do. But as of right now, not to say I told you so, but this is just kind of, you can't have a high growth flyer, that's a long shot like AMD and the market get really volatile. It was a really worst case scenario for everything. It was the perfect storm, and AMD just got hammered. But I do want to just touch upon the portfolio real quick. So if you guys, if you stuck around for so long, I am building this portfolio. I'm just kind of showing you guys like what I would be doing. And I've been adding to it. I'm still down. I'm still roughly flat because I'm pretty much been focused on buying stocks when they go down heavily, and because of how volatile things are, generally that's just making things go flat. But I do have some big losers and I do have some big gainers so far already. Facebook has been, I did add some Facebook when it dropped below 150. But again, Facebook's just not having a good time. It's going to be really interesting to see how its earnings come out. So I'm down pretty big on that. British American Tobacco and all three are performing much better, much faster than I thought they were going to. I made a video about both of them. I made a video discussing British American Tobacco and how it's a stock I thought would be a good play for November and also going into 2019. Great defensive play, great dividend, and it is feasibly undervalued compared to its peers and to its book value. So this is a company that pays an amazing dividend and could go up feasibly 20 to 40% to become properly valued, at least from the research I've done so far in it. So very good performer. The short ETF is doing pretty well. I've been slowly adding to it every time that there's a massive pop in the Asian markets. I generally buy it, because it's normally just pumping. Intel doing pretty well. It was negative for a while, but we just kind of popped up back, just a couple percent up. NVIDIA, I bought NVIDIA a little too early, but I did buy a pretty small position when I started it. I did pick up some more shares today at close. Mark that today. So I do think NVIDIA will do well after the earnings. I think it's just getting hammered because of the whole semiconductor space. But I don't think NVIDIA is going to have the same issues with its GPU sales as AMD. Who knows if I'm right or wrong, but I'm comfortable right now with the price for NVIDIA. It could drop substantially, and that's why it's still a relatively small position. But I'm definitely, still bullish on NVIDIA. Pepsi, up a couple of percent on a dividend aristocrat, not bad. Starbucks gave back, a couple of percent the past 2 days, but still up 5% since I started the position. So really good play. Nintendo down about 7%. That's still going to be really... this is going to be a, big risk, big reward because it's going to be banking on holiday sales. So, when I start to see, when we get closer to the holiday time, I'm going to really gauge how big of a play I want to make this. Fundamentals are great. It's just really how popular their game's going to be. Gold, pretty much flat. MICRON, I bought some today. I bought another 10 shares because I do think that, between $30 and $35 a share, I will continue to buy it. If we had a recession, it could drop 20 to 10, but at least as of right now, looking a year or two out, a couple years out, Micron, I definitely think should be, a 3 to 5 bagger from whatever its low is going to be. And Skyward Solutions haven't really added anything to it. Skyward Solutions, I do think it's on sale right now, but there just hasn't been much news with the company, so I'm still kind of just waiting on earnings and, more information from it. But still good plays. So this is kind of the update. I wanted to let you guys know what are my thoughts on with the market. If you guys have any other questions, about the market or about stocks I'm in, about anything, feel free to let me know down in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.